Well, now, in a landmark ruling by the European Court of Human Rights, they say governments have a duty to protect people from climate change.
Yes, this follows a case brought by a group of elderly Swiss women who argued Switzerland's government violated their human rights by failing to act quickly enough to address climate change.
Well, the Strasbourg judges agreed, and the ruling can now trickle down to influence the law in 46 countries in Europe, including the UK. But this is important. Emily and I have been looking into this case, and we were particularly struck by the justification given by the lawyer who fought this case.
Yes, well, we can listen to what she says about the conflict between democracy and combating climate change.
Well, in Switzerland, it's particularly problematic because they have referendums. And one of the defences run by the government was, we had a referendum on this and the people decided they didn't want it. And therefore, we've done our best, effectively. But this is something that comes up all the time in relation to human rights. It's the conflict between this idea of democracy as just what the people choose and democracy as entailing some fundamental and universal rights, which matter irrespective of what the majority decides.
Irrespective of what the majority decides.
Well, it raises the question, what is democracy? Very interesting indeed. We're now joined by John Grant, who's a senior lecturer in sustainable construction and climate change. John, thank you very much for joining us. Lots of people are concerned that this ruling by the ECHR essentially just runs roughshod through the idea of national sovereignty and democracy. What do you make of it?
Well, that's not true. What we're dealing with here is the flawed presumption that everybody making a decision has been informed in a balanced and scientific way. And, you know, the reality is that there is so much misinformation out there that people are fundamentally a little too calm.
So we're all a bit too
stupid,
facing. John, to understand. We're all a bit too stupid.
No, I didn't say stupid. I'm saying they're being actively misinformed. Not stupid, but there is an agenda here which is promoted by a number of media outlets and government that there's nothing to worry about. And quite rightly, the people out there sort of accept those media outlets rather than the scientific outlets, which I would say, you know, are putting forwards a much sterner and a much harsher future that we should prepare for.
Do we do this on any other issue? On any other political issue, do we say, oh, actually, you should probably not vote on whether you should replace your boiler or not because you're not well informed enough about it? Do we do that on social policy? Do we do that on tax and spend? Do we do that? Do we consult some unelected group of people in order to say what people are or aren't allowed to vote on any other issue?
Well, I'm not really qualified to talk about other issues. What I am qualified to talk about is the fact that we are in a climate emergency and we need to act immediately. And if people are not informed enough to realise there's an emergency, then they're acting from a false premise. And that's all I would like to, you know, to put forwards in that all the public events that I've been to, and I've been to dozens of them, at the end of my presentation, in which I, you know, would argue is a well measured and scientific, based on nearly 200 years of science, people are completely shocked about the false information that they've been fed, that
John,
this is going to be too expensive, it's China's fault, all of these things.
Yeah, fair enough. But, John, one of the arguments put forward by this group of elderly Swiss women, and they were backed by Greenpeace, was that their demographic group is particularly vulnerable to climate-induced heat waves, and therefore the Swiss government not doing enough about climate change went against their human rights. But I've read, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but actually elderly people are more likely to die from cold weather than from heat.
Well, that's true at the moment. That's a very good statistic. But the reality is that older people are more vulnerable to extreme high temperatures because they often have other illnesses that, you know, just a part of aging. And it makes them more vulnerable in the same way that very young people are vulnerable to extreme temperatures. Both hypothermia covers high and low temperatures, and older people and young people are vulnerable to hypothermia. And we should be prepared, and it is possible to prepare for people, prepare the environment for people so that they don't suffer extremely high temperatures or low temperatures. Remember, this is climate change. We could very likely have very cold temperatures associated with this, as well as extremely high ones. This is not a gentle turning up of the dial. Yes, there's an average increase in temperature, but we could, especially here in the UK, we could experience very cold winter temperatures. That's not off the cards. You know, we're not going to get
John,
to
what
south
I'm
of
struggling
France
to
here.
understand here
is
why is it illegitimate for someone who might well actually accept everything that you say, accept every single element of the fact that the climate is changing due to anthropogenic actions. Everything that you say completely bang on. But what if someone wants that? What if someone wants a more chaotic climate? Is that an illegitimate... It might be a quirky political position, but should they not be allowed to vote for that?
Well, yes, but they should be allowed to vote for that. Totally honest about it. Most of the people that I talk to that don't want change expect the world to remain as it is now if they don't change. Like if we don't replace those boilers, we don't improve our houses, we don't change how we travel, what we eat, that everything will just stay as it is now, which for most people in the UK, it's okay. Yes, we could do with a lot more money. There's a crisis there as well. But fundamentally, there's this misunderstanding that if we don't change, that everything will remain the same. And they don't realise that we're actually on a path. We're actually moving towards this, and not changing will only speed up that
Here you
path.
seem to be disagreeing with the ECHR, who've said that actually, irrespective of what people vote for, we're going to do this anyway. Here, people have voted for something, and their vote has been thrown away.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been on GBNews a couple of times where we've had this debate, and it's been explained that it's tens of billions, maybe hundreds of billions to adapt to this. And so people just quite rightly go, oh my goodness, what are you doing? We shouldn't be spending money like that. And of course, they don't end that discussion by saying, and in the long run, we're going to save a great deal of money. And unless you put that full narrative into the discussion, people will quite sensibly act on not spending hundreds of billions of pounds on changes, because change is scary. And you need to believe me that it's a better world that I want, not some sort of tree
John, I think that the concern is, though, that, of course, the judges at the European Court of Human Rights are acting in a very political way, which isn't necessarily what nations thought they were signing up for. But thank you very much indeed, John Grant, UAE Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Construction and Climate Change.